In this video, I'm going to show you how to learn any language fast without wasting time. Going to show you what you need to do to learn any language in 3 months or less. I'm going to give you a step-by-step plan that you can follow, and as long as you work hard, you'll see results. And the first thing we need to talk about is goals. If you are like most people, your goals in language learning are going to be understanding native speakers, yeah, understanding native speaker content, shows, TV, podcasts, whatever, or native speakers in real life in conversation, almost as easily or as easily as you understand people in your native language. That's one of the goals. And the other goal would be to speak the language fluently with good pronunciation and with the minimum amount of mistakes possible. Those are the goals. And everything that you do that is not helping you move in that direction as fast as possible is a waste of time. It's a distraction. It doesn't matter if it makes you feel good, if it makes you feel like you are learning without much effort, if it's easy to do, if it feels like a game, whatever. If it's not helping you move fast towards either understanding the language well or towards speaking it well, and there are lots of things like this that feel like learning, but you're not really doing much. So after, at the end of the day, you haven't improved at all either of those skills. You're wasting your time if you're doing those things. All right. Later on, I'll talk about all the things that you're wasting your time with and that you should stop doing immediately. But let's talk about the goals. Like I said, comprehension and speaking. You want to be able to understand native speakers well and easily, effortlessly. You shouldn't try to learn the language effortlessly. If they tell you you can learn the language effortlessly, they're lying to you. But the goal should be to understand native speakers effortlessly. And the second goal should be to speak as effortlessly as possible, fluently, with good pronunciation. What do we need for that? Well, for both of them, we'll need vocabulary and pronunciation. You notice that they didn't include grammar here. That's because you don't need to study grammar. I'm going to tell you why. To understand a language well and to speak it well, you're going to need words first. You can't understand a language if you don't know the words. You need the vocabulary. You need to know as much vocabulary as possible because otherwise, it doesn't matter how much grammar you will not understand it if you don't know the words. Same for speaking. You can't speak if you don't know the words that you need to be able to say what you want to say. So, the first ingredient is vocabulary. We need to work on learning as much vocabulary as possible, as fast as possible, for both comprehension and for speaking. The second thing we need, which is almost as important, is, and in fact, some people say it's more important, and that might be true, although hard to tell. Pronunciation. Because if you know the words, and this happens a lot to people who are learning English as a second language in places like Spain, they know a lot of words in English, but then they're hopeless when it comes to understanding native speakers, simply because they don't know how pronunciation works. They know the words because they know how they're written, but they completely butcher the pronunciation. They have no idea what those words are supposed to sound like. So that will stunt both the speaking and the comprehension. Because even if you don't, even if you know the words, if you can't really identify the words when you listen to native speakers, you won't understand. Yeah. So as important, almost as important, or maybe even more important than vocabulary is pronunciation. I guess not more important. They're equally important because if you know pronunciation but not the words, again, you won't understand either. You need both for comprehension and for speaking. Yeah, you don't need grammar. Or you grammar is nice to have, but you don't necessarily need it. I'll tell you why. If you know the words and you know how pronunciation works, Even if you have no idea how grammar works, you'll still understand. Maybe not super accurately, you won't understand exactly everything because you will not understand the structure of the sentence sometimes, but you will be able to understand what they're trying to say simply based on context by knowing the words and being able to uh, identify the words. You'll understand. And this makes grammar the least important thing and the easiest thing to learn as well. Because if you already know vocabulary and pronunciation, if you start listening to the language a lot, you'll just learn all the grammar in context. And same with speaking. If you speak a lot, with after learning enough vocabulary and knowing the pronunciation, and you listen to the language and you speak the language a lot, you learn the grammar. If you don't believe me, can you please explain me how you learn your native language? Did you study grammar before you learn to understand the language or to speak it? No, of course not. Nobody did that. We all learned grammar, or we were taught grammar rather, in school for some reason. And we could all speak the language pretty well already. Um, some better than others, but we could all speak the language. We could all understand it. We didn't need grammar. Same in a foreign language, right? You know the words and you know how pronunciation works. You will understand the language and you will be able to speak it. You'll be able to speak it if you get this third ingredient. If you know the vocab and you know the pronunciation and you listen to the language a lot, you'll understand. You'll soon understand everything. But as long as you don't get, if you don't get speaking practice regularly, you will not. Uh, you will never be fluent. Yeah, you cannot become fluent without speaking a lot. It doesn't matter how much comprehensible input you do or any of that. If you don't practice just speaking often, you will not become fluent. So, what's the game plan? The game plan is simple. We learn a lot of vocab and we learn pronunciation. And then we practice speaking. Or rather, we learn everything at the same time. Because you don't need to wait until you know a bunch of stuff, this many hours of input, or you need to know this many words before you try to speak. Not really. You can start speaking from day one if you do it right. Speaking practice doesn't mean that you should speak to native speakers. You've got the internet, you've got AI, you've got all sorts of cool things that people didn't have 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So let's use those. If you are familiar with the concept of language islands, go check it out. I've got tutorials on how to do that. That's already, uh, if you've got your language islands, you wrote your language islands, that'll be enough to learn all the basic vocabulary you need, to learn pronunciation well, and to get a lot of speaking practice on your own. If you create your language islands and then you do the shadowing technique with them over and over again. And after 10 to 20 hours of doing that, you already know hundreds of words and sentences, probably thousands of words. You'll know pronunciation pretty well, and you'll be able to say a lot of stuff because you had speaking practice. If vocabulary is very difficult, you can also use associations. Yeah, at first. In fact, I do recommend using associations. But just by creating language islands and learning them by shadowing and listening and repeating, you learn all of this pretty quickly. Now, just with language islands, you get pretty good at speaking and quickly. You get good at conversations, but it's not enough to understand the language well because um, you can't really think of all the vocab you'll have to learn to be able to understand the language. In daily conversations, or even in longer, more complex conversations, we only use a fraction of all the words that you know. Yeah, you need to know a lot more vocab to understand the language. than you need to know to speak. With a couple thousand words, you can have pretty good conversations, but you need 5 to 10 times that to be able to understand complex subjects and podcasts and things like that. So for comprehension, you need way more vocab, and for that, we'll use mass sentences. But this is the game plan basically. Start memorizing vocabulary with associations, create language islands, lots of listening, repeating, shadowing with language islands to learn vocabulary, pronunciations, and get speaking practice, improve your speaking from day one, and then move on to do the same with mass sentences to learn the rest of the language. So the 20% most important stuff will be your language islands. This is the Pareto principle. 20% will be the language islands will be the 20% most important stuff that you need to learn really, really well to speak well. And the remaining 80% will be everything else that you need to maybe not use flawlessly in conversation, but you need to be able to understand them at least. So you need to learn those after your language islands. All right? Anyway, let's continue. So, mistakes. The main mistakes people make in language learning. These are the main mistakes people make in language learning. Do you see anything familiar here? Apps like Duolingo and a bunch of others that I won't mention simply because I started using them. I stopped using them a very long time ago. Waste of time. If it's gamified, red flag, it's a massive waste of time. Don't use it. Apps are slow, they're a dopamine trap, it's pretend learning. It's making you feel good, and that's it. They're designed to keep you hooked, but you don't improve much. You don't improve your comprehension, and you don't improve maybe your comprehension a little bit because you learn some words, but it's extremely slow and ineffective, and it's a waste of time. And it won't do much for your speaking. That's how you get all those people with 2,000 day streaks on Duolingo, things like that, and they still can speak and they can't understand the language either. Waste of time. It's a distraction. Again, like I said earlier, if it's not helping you move fast towards complete comprehension, effortless comprehension, and fluency, waste of time. Apps a waste of time, massive waste of time. You should sue them even because of all the hundreds or even thousands of hours of your life that you wasted because of them. Language classes, complete waste of time. I wouldn't say so, but obsolete, slow, ineffective. This is ancient technology. This is and there are ways of like if I was in charge of a class, if a group class, I could make it interesting and I could make it effective using my method. But the way it's taught with grammar books, different exercises, multiple choice, this and that, give you the homework. You barely do any speaking practice. You barely do any listening practice, apart from the teacher, which is not realistic listening practice. Very slow, very ineffective. You'll need years and years to get to B2 level or C1 level. Many years. And for a lot of people, not even then. No, I know lots and lots of people who've been stuck at the A2, B1 ish level in English for a decade. And they keep going to English classes every year here. And they, at the end of the year, they're more or less at the same level that they were at the beginning of the year. And then next year, then they do nothing uh, during the summer. And then they go back and restart at the same level and again and again and again. And there's no improvement. Language classes extremely, extremely uh, ineffective and slow. Next one, almost as slow and ineffective. Comprehensible input. Really slow. You need thousands of hours watching dumb content, childish beginner videos. Honestly, most of us have better things to do with our time than watch childish. done videos for beginners, and you have to do that for many hundreds of hours before you can read or listen to or watch something slightly more interesting. So extremely slow and ineffective. Also, too passive. There's no speaking there. I mean, theoretically, you could shadow the video or something like that, but no, people who are into comprehensible input, this is what you get. And trust me, someone was telling me the other day in the comments, "Oh, don't knock it until you've tried it." Mate, I've read 100 books, no, way more than 100 books in French to be over 150. But right, I keep reading books in French, but because it's interesting. But back in the day, I was reading books because I thought I'd get fluent in French at some point. And my spoken French, even after I don't know how many thousands of hours of videos, podcasts, and books, my spoken French wasn't good still. You know why? Because you need speaking practice to get good at speaking. So comprehensible input is good for reviewing what you've already learned, and it's good to enjoy content, to enjoy the results. It's comprehensible input is you enjoying interesting content in the language after doing the hard work. You cannot get the results by doing the this. You need to first do the hard work, right? Also, the last bit, the 80-20 rule. In this case, it's against you because comprehensible input will be surprisingly effective at first, and then it'll give you a false sense of improvement because once when you start listening to content or watching videos or reading or whatever you're doing, you'll improve or you'll feel like you improve a lot at first because you learn all the common words fast. But the problem is after the first thousand-ish words in the language, the frequency of the words drops very, very fast. So after learning the first 500 to 1000 words, you need more and more and more input to learn more words. Yeah, instead of learning 1000 words with I don't know 100,000 words of input, you need a million words of input to learn the next 1000 words, and even more for the next 1000 words, and so on. So the amount of input you need per word keeps growing after, and it grows really fast after the first few thousand words. So it becomes very slow very quickly. It's again, it's good to review what you've already learned, and it's good to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Once your level is good, you've learned thousands of words, you've memorized thousands of words, tens of thousands of example sentences. You learn pronunciation, and then now you get to listen to podcasts, watch films, and read books or whatever you want to do. You get to enjoy all that. But if you try to learn by doing that, and trust me, I've done a lot of it in the past, I still I still read and listen to content a lot in many different languages, but because I enjoy doing it, and I do that in my free time, I don't consider it language learning, right? It's me enjoying the fruits of my language learning. It's not me learning languages. When I listen to a history podcast in Polish, or when I read books in French or Russian or whatever, it's me enjoying the language. It's not me learning. The learning has been done before to be able to get there. The last one, the passport bro expat's favorite. Just move to the country and talk to people, bro. Imagine it won't work because unless you just abandon your previous life and just move somewhere, get a job there, move in with locals, only speak the language. You don't go on the internet and you only use the language. And 99.9% of people won't do that. It's not going to work because if you move to the country, you will need a job, And most of you will have an online business or an online a remote job, and you will do it in English. So that's already most of your day in English. And then you spend lots of time, because we all do, online, and that's going to be mostly also in English or whatever your native language is. So that's not going to be in the target language either. So your practice is going to be uh, showing up to some socializing events or some bar, probably also with other English speaking expats, and there try to talk to people, or the short interactions you've got, you have on a daily basis with people, supermarket or bakery, whatever. But that's, you don't say more than 50 sentences a day in total, which is nothing. So just talk to people, bro. It's not going to work. If you do an hour of shadowing, intensive deliberate practice with language islands, you get more practice in one session, in 1 hour session, in an hour session, than in a month or two or even 3 months of move to the country and talk to people, bro. And I'm serious. Just do the math, right? It just because it's over 1,000 sentences that you shadow in an hour, around 1,000, slightly more than 1,000. Some of you have been living in South America for 6 months or more, and you haven't said, you haven't spoken 1,000 sentences in Spanish in total. Yeah, I do that in an hour of uh, shadowing. So yeah, go out, talk to people, move to the country, have fun with that, but do the work at home. If you've done 30, 50, 1,000, 100,000 um, sentences, reps of listening and repeating using mass sentences and language islands, the talk go out and talk to people part is going to be extremely easy because you'll be fluent already. But if you try to learn by going out and talking to people, you'll get to a very basic level, survival level maximum, and you'll stay stuck there forever. This reminds me a little bit of a guy who he was really fat. I kept telling him, "Hey man, why don't you come to the gym with me one? Give it a try, and then you start coming." And it's like, you know what? I'll lose some weight and then I'll start going. But I really need to lose some weight first. And it's like, it doesn't work like that. This is the same thing. You improve your speaking with deliberate practice, and then you go out and talk to people, and you actually enjoy the conversations. And if you've got 1,000 language island sentences that you've memorized and practiced with shadowing, and you're able to use them in conversation, the talk to people bro part is going to be much easier because, well, you'll be able to say a lot of stuff. So conversations will keep going, and you will get way more practice this way every time you try to talk to people. So yeah, show up prepared. That's all I have to say. So long story short, short summary of language learning, the main language learning mistakes people are making these days. Apps, waste of time, delete all of them. Language classes, very slow, not an effective use of your time, especially if it's grammar focused, and especially in groups, because in groups uh, you go into progress. Classes are already slow, even one on one with an online tutor. But if you're in a group, and I guarantee there's going to be someone that's very slow there, you're going to make progress at the slowest. Uh, like the slowest guy in the room will in the classroom will set the pace. So, and even if everyone was smart, classes would be slow because it's just an obsolete method. The grammar, the teacher talks for a while, then gives you some exercise to do. It's very slow and obsolete. Avoid comprehensible input. Again, that's a reward, not an effective way of learning. Do the learning first with deliberate practice and hard work, and then enjoy the input with interesting stuff. Avoid all the childish beginner dumb content, and jump straight away to interesting. I'm listening to a really cool podcast in Polish about like World War II, and I understand it. Even my spoken Polish is not very good, but I understand everything because I learned tens of thousands of words before that and all the pronunciation. So I understand well. Um, but I did the learning before I started listening to that because otherwise it'd be a waste of time. But find something that's really interesting and then start listening to it once you've learned all the vocab that you need and you'll learn pronunciation. Otherwise, it's going to be not as enjoyable and also not a good use of your time. And finally, move to the country and talk to people, bro. No, learn to speak first and then do that. So it's going to be much more enjoyable and a better use of your time, right? Next, comprehension. And I've been talking about this already, but how to understand any language. This is the fastest and most effective way to improve your comprehension. It's not comprehensible input or any of that nonsense. You need two things, basically. Grammar is included here because I want to talk about it, but you need two things. You need vocabulary and you need pronunciation. And here you see why. If you don't know the words, you can't understand or speak. Basic. Makes sense, right? It's logical. If you don't know how pronunciation works, you might be able to understand the language when you read it, but you won't be able to understand native speakers, and you won't be able to speak well either. They won't understand you, or you'll sound like shit, and they'll make fun of you. Maybe not. Like, I wouldn't make fun of you, but again, learn pronunciation. It's a game changer. So you need vocab and you need pronunciation. You don't need grammar that much, and I'll explain why. Um, let's well, I'll explain why right now. Because if you know vocab and you know pronunciation, you can listen to the language and you can speak the language, and eventually you can already understand. You can speak. You can make yourself understood, and the more you listen, the more grammar you learn in context, and you'll end up not needing to. You'll end up learning all the grammar in context without having to study the rules. That's how you learned. That's how we all learned our native language. So, vocab, super important. This is my formula to learn vocab. Memorize vocab, studying with the most common words. Memorize vocab with associations, mnemonic associations, as fast as possible. Use math sentences to review that vocab, and then use word families to review that vocab. So you need to learn. You need to learn over 10,000 words to be fluent in a language. Uh, and 20, 30,000 would be a good idea as well. How do we get there? If you're learning 5 words a day, sorry, but you need a decade to be conversational, like to have a decent understanding of the language, and that's a massive waste of time. So don't do that. Learn to use associations, create mnemonic associations, and watch my tutorials on how to do that. And then take the math sentences, and in those math sentences, you get all those words with example sentences so you can review them in context. And the math sentences will also include word families. So, word families are groups of words with the same root or groups of words that are related to each other. So, if you create a mnemonic association for the first word in the group, let's say, let's find it. Let's use to accept, for example. Um, that word family would include to accept, accepted, accepting, acceptance, acceptable, unacceptable, 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 and a bunch of other words. I keep mixing it with it. It's inacceptable in German, but it's unacceptable. Yeah. Anyway, you can't know everything, right? So that would be our word family. Normally 5 to 10 words, sometimes as many as 20 that are related to that to that well. So and this is something a lot of people tell me. They're not good with associations and they can't do them very fast. Still, can you do 10, 20, 30 a day? That's enough. Because if you do it only with the first word from the family, word family, in this case, to accept, you memorize that with an association. And then the rest of the words from that family, you can, through sheer pattern recognition and context, because they'll be in sentences and they'll be related words. And if you know what to accept is, if you say acceptable in a sentence, you guess what it means. So if you can associate 10, 20, 30 words a day, um, that's the same amount of word families that you're learning, and that will allow you to learn a lot of vocab very fast. And then the only thing you need to do is just keep reviewing the list regularly. Yeah, create associations, review with math sentences, learn all the related words with math sentences. Should through because there are different ways of learning things, right? There are, and I'm not much of a science and math guy, but there are things that are logic, or logical things. And then there's raw data. You just have to, like, 2 plus 2 equal 4. That's just logic. You don't need to. That's the same in every language, right? Um, or if you learn, like, grammar is logic, for example. Once you learn grammar patterns without studying the rules, through sheer pattern recognition, you can make sense of how things work, and you just, when you see something, some verb in some new form that you hadn't seen before, but you recognize the pattern. So it's pattern recognition. That's logic. Um, but for that to work, first you need the raw data. If you don't know the meaning of specific words, you've never seen that word before, you won't use logic. You won't be able to use logic. So associations to learn the first word, and then the rest of it is just logic, just context. So this is how. And someone will say, okay, but that's comprehensible input. Okay, in a way, it kind of is, but it's hyper optimized, super efficient comprehensible input. So it's a hyper efficient version of it, and using associations first, right? So in a way, we could say it's comprehensible input, but it's not what people do when learning through comprehensible input. This is not a story. You're not learning dumb stories or anything like that. No, no, no. This is going to be, it's hardcore. It's a lot of sentences with lots of words, but it works. Next, pronunciation. How to learn pronunciation? Super easy, super important, and easy. Okay, not easy. It's simple but not easy. All of this is, again, it's easy for me because I'm used to doing it. Anyone can do it. Even if you're not very smart, you'll be able to do it. Um, it's simple. It's not easy. It's not easy because it's hard work. But if you're disciplined, you can do this. And it's worth doing because you'll get results 10 times faster. Yeah. So super important. Very very simple. Um, Simply, we'll take the math sentences from earlier and we'll shadow them. What does that mean? We'll play the audio file and we'll read the thing and try not to read. We'll just shadow and we'll say the sentences alongside what we are hearing. So it's not exactly listening and repeating. We'll try to. It's like singing a song when you are listening to a song. We try to speak alongside it, and you try to sound as close as possible. When it comes to pronunciation, and also the stress of the words in the sentence, the rhythm, and all that. The more of this you do, the better you'll get at both understanding native speakers and also at speaking. Your speaking will get much better. It'll get much smoother, more flowing, natural, better pronunciation. You'll sound much better if you do this. In fact, I should probably do it for my English. I didn't learn English this way, and it shows. But yeah. This is what you should do for pronunciation. Mass sentences, the same ones that you use to learn vocab, so then you're reviewing as well, and language islands, because then you learn to say all the stuff that you want to be able to say. And with the mass sentences, you learn all the vocab, all the vocab that you learned, you memorized, and then you review it. You're reviewing it again now by shadowing, and also you're learning specifically the pronunciation of all those sentences that you learn. So then that will really help your listening comprehension. Finally, grammar. Grammar is obviously you need to know grammar. You need to be able to use grammar. But if you've learned 20,000 sentences that include thousands of verbs in the language in every possible conjugation, there's so much vocabulary that it's got over 10,000 words of vocabulary, and every common verb with every possible conjugation is included. Do you need grammar rules if you already learned all that and you've been repeating them over and over? No, you already know grammar after doing that. That's it. That was the secret. That's how you learn grammar. Okay, let's talk about speaking. Speaking the language fluently. And I've already been talking about language islands, mass sentences, um, talking about shadowing. It's very simple. We'll use the 80-20 rule here. There are the things that you need to know really well. You need to be able to say really well because you say them all the time, or you say them often enough. Those are the language islands, or you want to be able to say them. Uh, I get that as well. People who haven't been to the country, or well, they haven't had that conversation before, but they want to be able to have that conversation. Even if you don't do it regularly, you should prepare. So this is for those important sentences. That's the 20% most important stuff that you should learn really, really well. And the remaining 80%, this is more or less, I'm not saying that this should be 20% exactly, and this should be 80%. No, like there's 1,000 here, 10,000 here. This could be 500 sentences, and this could be 5,000 or 20,000. It really depends on how many of them you. It really depends on the language. It really depends on how much of it you need, or at which point you think you're good enough, good to go, and you just you don't need it anymore. But this is all approximative, right? But it should be a core of sentences for all your common situations, conversations, scenarios that you have, or that you think you'll have, or you want to have. You prepare sentences for all of that, and you practice lots of shadowing and also retrieval practice. I'll get to that later, but lots and lots and lots of shadowing, listen and repeating, and then, when possible, shadowing to get really good at saying all those things. And then the same thing with all of this, but less amount with each sentence. What's the difference? You We tend to say more or less the same things, talk about the same things with the same people, but you also need to be able to say more things because sometimes you will um, be in unexpected situations, or you have to say things that you don't normally say. So you should be prepared for that as well. Luckily for you, with the mass sentences, you'll get pretty good at that, and this will also help with comprehension massively. So yeah, focus. My advice would be to do 50-50. 50% in the core of your time, you listen and repeating or shadowing these core sentences that you have to use all the time. The the other 50% of the time, you listen and repeating, shadowing just mass sentences to learn the all of the language. Retrieval practice. This one you should do it 100% with the language islands. If you are some obsessive type that wants to learn everything perfectly, then do it with this as well. But it's going to be very, very time consuming. But retrieval practice basically means making flashcards. You get all these sentences in English, and you try to translate into the language, and then you'll get the feedback, and you try again and again and again with spaced repetition. This is an excellent way to find out why you're making your mistakes and to correct them. If you want to do it with this as well, it's going to be difficult and time consuming, but you'll reach a really, really high level if you do that. Do I recommend doing it? Really depends. If you just want to be able to talk to people, uh, yes, doing the ritual practice with the language islands will be more than enough to be fluent. But if you want to get to a C2 level and really good, and you sound really educated, and you make zero mistakes in your speaking, and you use really fancy vocab, then yeah, do it with mass sentences. But anyway, this is all you need. You need language islands and mass sentences with all the grammar and vocab, not all the existing grammar and vocab in the language, but all the common grammar and vocab in the language. You listen and repeat, shadow over and over again until you can say everything pretty well, and then residual practice with language islands, and maybe if you're a perfectionist, with mass sentences once you're done with language islands. And that's it. That's how you learn to speak any language well in a short amount of time. Vocabulary. Again, let's talk about vocabulary. I talk about this a lot. How do you learn vocabulary fast? You could do comprehensible input and learn words in context, and you learn a few hundred common ones very fast. After that, you will notice that the frequency with which words show up will decline rapidly. So you will need more and more comprehensible input to learn less and less words. So fewer words. Stanis Baratheon would correct me there. Game of Thrones reference. But yeah, comprehensible input is going to be very, very inefficient. Don't do that. I mean, do it. Listen to the language, yeah, but don't rely on it as your main method to learn vocab. What I recommend is this: first associations, then mass sentences, or rather, mass sentences by using associations. Mass sentences meaning every common word in the language is included there. Example sentences with of everything using word family. So every word, so they're grouped in sentences. Like the each group will have words that are related to each other. So you have to associate the first one, and that'll be enough to recognize all the other ones in context. And then pattern recognition and logic will do the rest. So you memorize the first word from each word family in context. No, in context. Oh, I'm tired today. You memorize the first word of each word family using associations, and then the rest you learn them in context through pattern recognition and logic. Simply read it and translate it. And you keep reviewing the list, memorizing unknown words, and you keep reviewing it over and over until you know it really well. If you want to really make sure that you know it really, really, really well, you turn them into flashcards and you review them like that. You translate into the language and you self correct. You get feedback. This is if you want to get extremely good at the language. Otherwise, mass sentences, every conjugation is included there. So this is also perfect to learn all the grammar without studying the rules. All the common words, you learn them in context, memorize the first one with associations, and then the rest in context. I know I'm repeating myself, but a lot of you really, really need to, because people ask for advice and then they will be like, yeah, 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 yeah. And then a week later, they'll come back and they'll be like, oh, by the way, I didn't do any of that stuff, but I just kept doing exactly the same thing. And for some reason, it's not working. And it makes me want to, okay, I'm not going to continue the, I don't want to get demonetized, but you get the idea. I need to repeat myself a lot so that people actually get what I'm talking about. Associations for the first word, or if you really like doing it, do it for more often, but memorize the first word with associations. The rest of them, context, all right? Just context, pattern recognition, lots of reviewing, and maybe ritual practice. Pronunciation. Let's take a look at, where should I put this? Yeah, let's take a look at pronunciation. How do we learn pronunciation the right way? Simple. It's hard work. It's not easy. It's not the most fun thing to do, but it works. We'll take the language islands that you have created already. What do you mean? You haven't created your language islands already? Then go write your language islands. Um, if you haven't, yep, pause the video and go watch the language islands tutorials and create your language islands. Translate everything into the target language, create your audio files. Yeah, you should do massive amounts of listening and repeating and shadowing with your language islands. The thousand-ish sentences, although some people do much less because they're lazy, and some people do way more because they are really hardworking, and those people tend to improve really fast. Also, if you create your language islands for Spanish or whatever language you're learning, you can reuse them to learn another language and then another one and another one. So it's really worth it to do. It just people get lazy with this, but it's a game changer if you do it right. So listen and repeat and shadowing language islands, many thousands of reps. So each sentence you should have listened to it and repeated it aloud 10 to 20 times at least, maybe more, until you can see it, until you can say each and every sentence without hesitation, complete sentence without, with a good accent, with like, stressing the right words. You should, yeah, basically you should say it really effortlessly and comfortably. And trust me, after a few thousand reps, you will notice how you it gets easier and easier to speak in the language. This an hour of this an hour of this exercise is worth many tens of hours of comprehensive input and all that. This will really improve both your listening comprehension and your speaking. Yeah. So lots of shadowing. First with your language islands, and once you get going with those, then the mass sentences. Lots of reps of that as well. This is mostly for comprehension, but will also improve your speaking. But language islands will really, really improve your speaking. And finally, extensive listening. And what do I mean with that? None of that dreaming Spanish, short stories, blah, blah, blah. None of that nonsense. Whatever you're into, I like history, I like geopolitics, economics. Uh, yeah, mostly history. I like a lot of history. I listen to documentaries, podcasts, things like that. I like combat sports as well, boxing, mixed martial arts. I listen to a lot of podcasts on those topics. I just jump straight to native speaker content by native speakers for native speakers, not learning content, right? Not Portuguese for beginners or any. No, no, no. You do this first, and uh, once you think that your comprehension is getting decent, you start doing this. Otherwise, it'll get frustrating. But if you do the beginner stuff, you do many hundreds of hours of listening to nonsense that will make you progress very, very slowly. You will slowly, very, very slowly gain comprehension skill. If you do this instead, it'll be hard work, but in 10, 20, maybe 30 hours maximum of doing this, your comprehension will be good enough to start listening to real life content about topics that you care about that are interesting. Maybe learn about the country that you move into. What about topics you care about? And it'll be much more enjoyable than listening to many hundreds of hours of nonsense of dumb beginner content. So yeah, do this the hard work first, and as soon as possible, keep doing this, of course, because this will improve your speaking. This won't. This is mostly for comprehension, but combine both. But jump straight to this native speaker content that is interesting, right? After doing the really hard work. This is how you learn pronunciation in a foreign language, in any foreign language. Language islands, how to use them, how to create them. I get a lot of questions about this. Language islands, okay. First of all, how many sentences should it be? I say 1,000 normally because it's a good. It doesn't have to be 1,000. 1,000 is an approximate number that I give people so that they try harder. A lot of people do more than that, and they do really well in conversation afterwards. Some people get really lazy and they do 30 sentences of language islands, and they're like, I mean, it's improved with this, but it's hard work, and I'd rather go back to comprehensible input, and then they keep not being. A year later, they're still not able to speak. Yeah, so around 1,000, aim for 1,000 topics. Well, categories. Conversations and situations. What's the difference? This is for, well, situations. Think of what, where, uh, what for. So if you're moving somewhere, things you'll have to do, interactions you will need to have, places you go to, make a list of that. The truck taxi driver, the cleaning lady, the whatever, talking to the, uh, I don't know, whatever you like doing. Uh, I was gonna say bribing cops. Don't do that. Or like getting out of prison in Romania or whatever whatever things you're into. Prepare for all the situations you think you'll face or that you'll like to have. Prepare sentences, every possible sentence you think you'll have to say. Prepare it. Write it down and translate it. That's category one. Category two is conversations. The thing you normally talk about in a. So this is, you know, introducing yourself. How are you? Blah blah blah. I'd like a beer, please. Blah blah blah. That stuff. Situational. This is when you start to have proper conversations. You need way more than my name's Mika. I'm from this place. I'm learning the language. That's the first 30 seconds of the conversation. Or first 2 minutes. After that, you will need a lot more, way more. Yeah. So what I recommend you do is, and storytelling is good in general, but I recommend you learn to tell some stories in the language, things that you normally, yeah, some stories, some interesting stuff you've done, or why did you move to that place, or what do you study? And I studied my PhD in this place and that place, and I was really into whatever Tibetan music, and but then at some point I discovered that I met this girl from Argentina, and I decided to move there because blah blah blah. And once I was there, like my first week, you're not going to believe this. The first week when I got there, I got marked, and then I lost everything on my passport. And you tell the whole story. Maybe not the most embarrassing things, but I've got some cool stories that I'm able to tell in lots of languages because I wrote the whole thing, I translated it into the language, and then I did lots and lots of listening and repeating and shadowing with it until I was able to say the whole story well. Um, Topics, if you like to rant about politics or how good or bad Trump is or whatever, uh, yeah, you should learn. Yeah, if you should learn to do that as well. All the things you normally talk about. If you like to talk about football, then write 200 sentences about football and why Messi is the greatest ever, and that will help you if you're in Argentina. If you're the previous guy who was marked in Buenos Aires, if you're able to talk about football and Yeah, that's probably you'll make some friends. Except if you say you're a fan, a River Plate fan, then the Boca Juniors fan, they don't do that. That's gonna get you in trouble. But yeah, in general, talk about football in Argentina. It'd be good. Stay away from picking sides there. Which team you support locally. That's my advice. And then yeah, personal info. Talk about yourself, your hometown. Describe your hometown. Describe the places you've been to. Describe your job or whatever you've been doing before. I've got long language islands about. Yeah, that time I worked for a year in the Spanish embassy in Berlin, and that's where I learned Russian, even if I wasn't using Russian for work, because I learned Russian and Romanian at the same time because I was living in East Berlin, and there are lots of people from the former Soviet Union there. And there I met my Moldovan neighbors who were speaking Russian. So I was already learning some Russian, so I started speaking Russian to them. I spoke Russian to them for a while, and then eventually I had them speak Romanian, and I started speaking Romanian. I eventually ended up speaking both languages with them because turns out people speak both languages in Moldova. Blah 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 blah. Like, all the stuff I've learned in lots of different languages because I wrote it down once and then with minor variations, I'm able to say it in Russian, I'm able to say it in German, I'm able to say it in a bunch of different languages, including Romanian and every other Eastern European language I've learned. You do the same thing with all the stories, the more of them you've got, the more you'll be able to speak, right? So this is it, language islands. Once you've written and your language channels are never done. You never completely. They're not never complete. You always find new things to add to them. If you find yourself in a situation that you didn't prepare for, you can always, when you go home, just write a bunch of stuff that you weren't able to say that you like to say next time in that specific situation, and you add more stuff to your language channels. Same with stories. Uh, more things that happen to you, you write another story, and you're able to tell. All things that you suddenly remember you hadn't prepared language islands for, you also prepare those. Um, so you're always updating and you're always writing more stuff, and this will help you learn. Obviously, with your first foreign language, but if you're learning a second foreign language, a third foreign language, having a long list of language islands already prepared will be super useful because you only have to translate them and start shadowing again. So you write them, conversations and situations, and translate and start shadowing. And you do at least 20,000, 10 to 20,000 reps of this, of your thousand ish sentences, and you'll be able to speak quite well in the language. 20,000 reps sounds like a lot, but a thousand-ish reps an hour, that's 20 hours of shadowing. You can do that in a month, right? All right, let's keep talking about speaking the language fluently. Everything you need to do to speak the language fluently. I've talked about language islands already. Super important. Prepare sentences for all the common scenarios and conversation topics that you usually have or that you think you'll need to have, and you write everything down and you translate it, and you create audio files, or we create audio files for you in NLL. Mass sentences, you'll find them in the speaking section. You take those as well and you start shadowing those as well. This will be useful and it'll definitely help you improve, but you should first focus on this because this is going to be the high impact stuff. If you're able to use language islands, if you've got good language islands, you'll be able to speak a lot. If you rely only on the mass sentences, you you learn a lot of sentences, but they'll be random sentences, and obviously your general speaking will improve, obviously, but it's not going to be as effective at making you speak well in the specific scenarios you want to speak the language in, because they're not designed for your specific case, right? So combine both your own language elements with mass sentences and massive amounts. Well, you see here, 50% language elements, 50% mass sentences, 30,000 to 100,000 reps in total of listening, repeating, or shadowing. What's the difference? Well, listening and repeating would be listening to the sentence, repeating after. Shadowing would be doing it simultaneously. Shadowing works really well with certain kind of materials. The difficulty, it's difficult to do if you it's difficult to do with most content because it's fast and you need time to process, and you once you understand a language and you understand a sentence, um, when you start repeating it, there's already another sentence coming, so it gets difficult. So what I've done instead is take the content and create, uh, basically multiply it. So there's so each sentence is repeated 5 times. So it's my name is Mika, and my name is Mika, my name is Mika, my name is 5 times, and nice to meet you, nice to meet you, nice. Just 5 times. It sounds like torture, but it's extremely effective because you hear it the first time, and the second, like when it's about to say it again, you can speak alongside it. You can shadow. So the next 4 times, you shadow it. So and the third time will be easier, and you'll improve a couple of things for pronunciation I noticed from the previous time. And the fourth sentence will be the fourth rep of the same sentence will be even better because you'll tweak a couple of things, and you'll sound even closer to the original. And the fifth time will be not perfect, but still better. And so with each sentence, you do 5 reps, and each rep you get a little bit better. And because you know it's 5 reps, you know what to expect. You know what's coming next. Instead of try doing one sentence and then there's another one, and that's going to be way too difficult. Yeah. So you use those for the mass sentences, and same thing for the language islands. 5 reps with each. So a couple hundred sentences, 5 times each. That's around an hour of 1,000 reps. That's around an hour. That alone will, if you do it daily, in a month, your speaking will skyrocket. Um, why 30 to 100,000 reps in total? That's a big range, right? Um, if you learn in Spanish, you'll be closer to this. If you learn in Chinese, or if you learn in Russian or Arabic, you'll be probably closer to this. It depends on how much experience you've got with language learning, but this depends on the difficulty of the language. Spanish, Italian, French, German, probably as well, around here for an English speaker. The more different the language is from the ones you already speak, the more reps you need. But again, 100,000 with 1,000 reps a day, that's 3 months, more or less. I do more than 1,000 reps. Honestly, I do 2,003 sometimes even more, because there's no diminishing returns here. The more of it you do, the faster you improve at speaking. It's a really it's a really powerful technique. If you do language islands and mass sentences plus shadowing, it's insane how fast you can improve both your fluency, your ability to not even think. You don't have to think in the language. If you've done this many reps, uh, you just can say things without thinking. You've got so many sentences just uh, stored in your hard drive that you just can at any moment just use them. But really good, uh, really good accent, really good rhythm, really good. Yeah, you it just comes out really natural, really native like. Maybe not exactly like a native, obviously, but you can sound really good if you do these many reps. So it's definitely worth it. And then we've got retrieval practice, and this is for perfectionists. If you're still worrying about making mistakes, and trust me, if you if you're doing this amount of reps of listening and repeating sentences, you learn all the grammar. You'll uh, speak in complete sentences with very few grammar mistakes already. But if you want to get rid of the few ones you're making, use the same language islands and mass sentences, make flashcards, translate from English into the language that you're learning, and you get the feedback immediately. You notice the mistakes, you try again and again and again until you get rid of the mistakes. And that's it. Yeah. So language islands, mass sentences, listen and repeat, shadow those all those sentences until you get insane amounts of reps. It's not that insane. 1 hour a day, that's 1 to 3 months to do all this amount of reps. And then residual practice to correct the few mistakes you're still making afterwards. And this is how you become fluent in any language fast. So, quick summary of the whole thing. How do you learn any language fast? You learn vocabulary with associations, mass sentences, and word families. You need a lot of vocab to be able to understand a language and to be able to speak it well. So you try to learn as much vocab as possible, as fast as possible. You take lists of mass sentences using word families, where the sentences are ordered with by words that are related to each other. So when you memorize the first word of the word family with an association, with a mnemonic association, all the other ones will be relatively easy, just in context and the sheer pattern recognition. You'll remember them, and you review the list over and over again, associating the words that you still don't know, uh, and the other ones is reviewing. And because they are lists of related words, it'll be easy, and you learn thousands of words fast this way. Yeah. And once you know, no, once you know, you learn both. You do both at the same time. But yeah, the second ingredient is pronunciation. If you want to speak a language well, you need thousands of words, and you need to know pronunciation, both to understand it and to speak it. So, together with vocabulary, you should be learning pronunciation by uh, doing lots of reps of listening and repeating and shadowing, using the high frequency, high impact language islands, lots of sentences that you've prepared for all the common scenarios, all the common situations and conversation topics, all the stories you want to tell. You write everything down, you translate it, create audio files, and start doing listening, repeating, and shadowing to learn the pronunciation, and also to learn to be able to say all that stuff. Yeah, around 1,000 language island sentences is good, and then we complement it with mass sentences to learn everything else. Because if you learn 1,000 sentences to talk about all the stuff you normally talk about, you'll be able to talk pretty well. But the moment you are forced to say something that you haven't prepared for, you'll be lost, right? So you need both. So you will take these sentences that you've been using, again, grouped in word families, so they're easier to remember. You've been memorizing the vocab, associations, and then lots of reviewing. And we start shadowing those as well. Take the audio files, lots and lots of repetitions, listening to it and repeating it aloud over and over and over again. And this will help you, first of all, learn pronunciation and understand the language really well, because you learn many thousands of words in complete sentences with native pronunciation, and this will help you understand everything eventually. Pretty fast, actually, compared to any other method. And it will also help you combine with this to become fluent fast, because if you learn all the sentences you need in all your common situations, scenarios, conversations, plus a bunch of other regular sentences, a bunch of common sentences in the language, apart from your own ones. Sentences that include basically all the normal vocabulary and grammar that the language uses. Between both of them, if you do enough reps of listening and repeating, and enough reps, I mean uh, 30 to 100,000 reps, which is 30 to 100 hours of listening and repeating or shadowing. It's not that much. It's 1 to 3 months if you do an hour a day or two a day. So yeah, if you do that, you'll be able to speak really well, and you'll be able to understand really well as well. This is how you learn any language fast. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you've got specific questions, a lot of people have questions about uh, specifically about associations, but also language islands. Let me know and I'll answer specific questions. Right?